One of the hardest, if not the hardest jobs out there is being a mom. For many, they don't take the time for themselves, leaving them emotionally drained and not giving 100% to their family. Joining us now to help you combat these feelings is psychotherapist and author of A Little Less of a Hot Mess, Kaitlin Soule. Kaitlin, thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
We're so happy to talk about not only the new book, but you being a therapist and how that kind of ties into you becoming an author. So first and foremost, how did you being a therapist inspire you to write this book?
Well, being a therapist gives us a lot of material to work with, right? And also being a mom to 3 gives me a lot of material to work with as well. I've always been a writer. I've always liked to process my own feelings through writing. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I realized so many of us were struggling with mental health. And so it seemed like the perfect time to share what I, had learned as a therapist and also what I'm still learning as a mom and put it all together in a book. And so I decided to start the writing process.
And so here we are, a little less of a hot mess.
Yes.
Now, the first thing that, you talk about, one of the big tips that you talk about in your book is putting yourself first.
Yes.
Why is that so important?
Well, because especially as women, I'll just say, and as moms, we get a lot of messages, social, cultural, societal messages around what it means to be a good mom, right? And a lot of that has to do with this self-sacrificing and putting your kids first, which I think naturally we all do in so many ways. But in that, we oftentimes lose ourselves and lose track of what we need to do in order to take care of us. And so while it sounds so cliche, it's cliche because it's true. If we don't actually put ourselves first and take care of ourselves, we can't take care of anyone else well. So that's definitely rule number 1, and I know it's so much easier said than done.
Mm-hmm. And have you had personal experience with that? I mean, you said you're a mom of 3.
Yes. I mean, some days I get it better than others. Just this morning I was like rushing off to get my kids to school and like feeling really flustered and missed my yoga class. So I think I'm a big fan of the word ish. I think we got to take good care of ourselves, and it's not going to be the same every day. So if you can pick 1 or 2 things that you can do for yourself each day, you're doing better than the day before where you did nothing. So it's okay that you're not getting it perfect. That's really what the book is all about. It's sort of like rejecting this message around perfectionism and motherhood and, needing to kind of follow the rules that don't necessarily apply to you or your values.
Well, speaking of that, one of the other tips that you provide in your book is focusing less on what society tells you that you should do. Mm-hmm. Why is that important?
Yeah, so I think, we learn a lot as children. We develop so many of our beliefs young in childhood about what it means to be, like I said, either a good mom or a good partner or a good friend, whatever it is. And so I think that we get so used to following the shoulds or the rule books that other people kind of put out for us that we forget what it is that we actually need. And when we live by the shoulds, the truth is, and anybody can attest to us, we just don't feel good. We don't feel like our authentic self. Living by the should can look like, I should, in this case, put my kids first. So that means I don't have time, every waking moment has to be about them. I don't have time to go to my yoga class or meet up with that friend or pursue this dream, right, on a bigger level. So when we follow the shoulds, we really lose track of what matters to us. And I think it's one of the #1 causes of, anxiety, stress, burnout, even depression.
Yeah, and it's so funny sitting here listening to you talk about this. This applies even to everyday life. So many people can take some of these tips and realize, even if you don't have kids, you might realize I'm already doing some of these things.
Yes.
Exactly.
And so that's a good point. I wrote the book, speaking to moms because I am a mom and it really fit the season of my life. But I think so many of the invitations into growth and taking better care of your mental health definitely apply to everybody, right? These are rules that we can all sort of start to step into or live into a little bit more.
Now, another tip that you mentioned, Kaitlin, is communication. And communication is so key to anything healthy in your life. But specifically, what did you, detail in the book about communication? Yeah,
so I think the important piece here, especially when it comes to motherhood, and you don't have to look far to realize that the rates of burnout, anxiety, and overwhelm for moms in this country have skyrocketed since the pandemic. And a lot of that is because what we call the mental emotional load of of motherhood and parenting, a lot of it still disproportionately falls on women. And so it's really important that we communicate to the people in our lives and, you know, our partners, that we actually need more, I hate to call it help, but we need to bring more equity into the home. And that can start with a conversation, that can start with just bringing up the pain points and where you're struggling. And I think so many women are afraid to have that conversation. We're afraid to say, hey, I'm struggling, I need some help here, because we feel like, again, going back to those shoulds, right? Like we should have it all together.
Yeah.
So really starting with some good communication. And the truth is, you know, in heteronormative relationships at least, you know, and I say probably across the board, that the research shows that men and partners do want to do more. They do want to step up. They just don't quite know how and haven't gotten the helpful messages, you know, from society along the way. So communication is a first step. And you can do that in your living room, or you can do that in a therapy office.
Well, another step is getting interested in yourself again, because so many times we put ourselves on the back burner.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. And so I love this piece because it might sound like putting yourself first, but it's a little bit different. It's not just about like, go get your hair done, or, you know, eat healthy, or go exercise. It's about, what am I actually interested in? Like, what do I actually care about? What makes me feel like a whole human? I know for me, I lost that in early motherhood. I was so overwhelmed, and there's seasons to everything, right? But I think remembering like what it is, and for me in this case, a lot of it has to do with writing and sharing, you know, my feelings on whether it be on Instagram or on my blog or in a book. And so figuring out what is it that makes me feel whole, I really think that's what helps us feel less burnt out.
And another way that you can avoid feeling burnt out is giving yourself some grace.
Yes.
How do you detail that?
That's a hard thing, right? And I work with a lot of people in my practice with anxiety disorders, or just a lot of women and moms who struggle with this. Giving ourselves grace means like lowering the bar, or, you know, not like letting go and not caring about anything. I really reject that notion as well. But I think it's really about treating yourself like you would a dear friend, being kind to yourself and recognizing that you really are doing the best you can with what you have. And the next moment or the next day is always another opportunity to do better or do something different.
Well, thank you so much, Kaitlin, for joining us on the show and giving us some tips on, you know, how to just be better and feel better as a whole. Thank you so much.
Yes, thanks for having me on.